Hey you guys, welcome. Today we're going to talk about Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig from Stonemaier Games. If you're unaware, Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig is actually a mashup of two fairly popular games, The Castles of Mad King Ludwig and Between Two Castles. It's actually a really brilliant combination of two games that I'm excited to be reviewing today. Thank you so much for finding this video. If you clicked play at all, I am so grateful you're here. I would love for you to click the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. It really does help me out. In Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, you are a competing architect to build the best castle for the Mad King. In this, you'll actually be working together with two other players to design castles in between you. This is one of the more unique parts of this game, is that you don't own a castle for yourself. There is no player board. You actually sit in between two of the player boards, and you work on both of them in turn. As a result, you will be remembered for not your best, but your worst creation. All right, let's go ahead and unbox and take a look at what's inside the contents of Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. The construction of this game is beautiful, but I would expect nothing less from Stonemaier Games. All of their production quality is top-notch. The instruction booklet is very sturdy. If you are familiar with Wingspan, it's a similar grade paper with a slight linen finish. You have your cards, your reference cards. You have your score books. I'm going to go ahead and set it up, and then we'll come right back for a sample of a game. All right, and like that, we're ready to play. Very quick setup. The buildings in between are going to represent the different players. However, the throne rooms are the beginning pieces of the castles that you'll be building. The gameplay is very simple. Each player will get a stack of 9 of these room tiles. You'll look through them and pick 2 that you want to build between your 2 castles. Then you'll go ahead and take this stack and place them underneath the castle of the player to your right. Once everybody has selected, you will turn over the tiles which you've chosen, and you're going to choose which of the 2 castles you're going to add them to. This is something that can be done alone, or probably should be shared. It should be a shared decision with your neighbor. If there's a disagreement, remember that you, that drafted the tiles, get the final say on which castle they go to. However, it is probably a gesture of good faith to share the decision with your neighbors in order to plan the best castle possible. So in these 2 examples, we have a spice room. A spice room is worth 2 victory points for every basement room that you have in the 2 directly beneath it. This isn't a bad one to place to the side of any throne room, because there will be lots of opportunities to get basements built beneath it. Now, the archery range is worth 1 victory point for every corridor that you have in your castle. A great one to get at the beginning so that you can plan and pick up corridors throughout the game. Once you've decided where they go and on which castles, you can go ahead and take the ones that were underneath your castle and you can look through them in order to select the next 2 that you're going to add. You'll start to notice that you get some nice chaining bonuses. For example, the breakfast nook will give you 2 victory points per every corridor above and below it. Over here we have a bonus for each corridor in your castle, so this might actually be a nice one to set aside for that castle in order to get a good payoff from the corridors. Something that you need to remember about your castles is they do work in floors. Some things must be placed on the ground floor, which is here, or higher. The downstairs ones have to be placed below your main floor. And remember, if you don't have a supporting floor, you are unable to place on top of it. Any outdoor tiles will not be able to have anything built on top of them, so beware, or you may end up locking yourself into a situation where you don't have a lot of placement options. Outdoor tiles may be built on any level of your castle, but they cannot be built on top of. You'll notice that you are rewarded for building certain types of rooms in abundance. For example, if you get 3 downstairs or basement rooms built in your castle, you get to choose any of these bonuses. Food will allow you to draw 5 tiles from a random stack and place one of them. If you get 3 living spaces, you get to place one of these bonuses in the throne room. These are things like the Fire Eater. Now, the Fire Eater will give you 1 victory point per torch that you have in your castle. A utility, you get to draw 3 of these bonus cards that can have massive payoffs and keep one of them. For example, 1 victory point per room below ground level, 2 victory points per specialty tile, which we'll get to in a minute, and 1 point per room on level 3 and higher. Outdoor living spaces, once you have 3 outdoor living spaces, you get to build a fountain for free. Now the fountains are just worth 5 victory points straight up, a nice bonus. If you have 3 sleeping quarters, you get to build a tower. Now the tower is considered an outdoor building, so it cannot be built on top of, and you get 1 victory point for every room below it. If you have 3 corridors, you get to build a grand foyer. Now a grand foyer connects other rooms, and you get 1 victory point for every bedroom that's surrounding it. Probably something you should get at the beginning rather than at the end. And then if you place 5 of one type of room, you get to place any one of these specialty rooms, the fountain, the tower, or the grand foyer, onto your castle. The game will go for 2 rounds, once drafting clockwise, once drafting counterclockwise, and then the game ends. It's simple, it's fast, it's relatively easy to play, and I found it a joy to play with kids as well, because you are able to coach them through it. Now the scoring is the part where this game gets really interesting. So you have 2 castles between each player, and the way it works is you take the value of your lowest valued castle. So this is for a couple reasons. One, it keeps you from neglecting one and really pouring resources and assets into the other. But it also creates a really unique scoring mechanic. If this is my lowest, it's likely the lowest of that person as well. And so it manages to isolate, in most cases, a single winner. In one of our games, we did have an instance where the lowest scoring castle was actually the same for 2 players. In that case, it comes down to whoever has the most specialty rooms, the grand foyer, the tower, or the fountain in their castle at the end of the game. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for sticking around, and please stick around to the end if you can. It really does help content creators on YouTube if you watch the end of their videos. Also, go ahead and check out some of my other videos. If you hit the like and subscribe, these are all things that you can do to help support me as I try and keep these game reviews coming for you. Between the Castles of Mad King Ludwig is a drafting tile laying game that you actually execute in teams, but don't be fooled, it's actually very competitive. Although there is not much opportunity for you to attack or mess with other players, there is still some steep competition as you try to design the best castle between the 2 of you. Now here's some things that I really liked about Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. One, it's just a brilliant idea, which got me from the beginning. I love the idea of mashing up 2 games into where their crossroads kind of intersect and what you can make out of the combination of the 2 of them. One of the things that I love most about board games and the board game community is just the endless variety that you can find in board games in mechanics, and new mechanics are continually being invented, which is a brilliant thing that gets me so excited. This is one of those things that you take 2 games that seem to operate separately, smash them together, and you get something new and unique, something that you probably wouldn't have come up with before. If you know me, I'm a dad of young kids, and I'm trying to get them introduced to board games early on. Between the Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig is a great way to do that. Because you actually sit in between the castles and you work together to score them, you just need to make sure that every other person in the circle is an adult or somebody fairly competent, and you can add kids as young as you want. You can basically be playing off of this side, and the child doesn't need to necessarily be doing much, but they can still be privy to your reasoning and your gameplay decisions in order to teach them how to play these more intense board games. The production quality of Between Two Castles is phenomenal. There's a great production value, everything is really high quality, and it just works really well. The rulebook is clear and easy to get into, easy to move through, and the game at its core is just really nice boiled down mechanics that really work well together. Now, what are some things you may not love about Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig? The scoring is kind of a bit odd. You've built something amazing and something a little bit less amazing, and nobody ever looks at the amazing thing that you did, because that's not the impressive part. The impressive part is keeping your two castles balanced to the point that your score is relatively the same, no matter which one is higher or lower. It's just kind of an odd feeling to win in that way, to accept your lower score. It's like you got the highest of the lowest, which is kind of an odd way to score a game. Not that it's a terribly bad thing, but it did feel a little bit off. At its core, this is a pretty neat drafting game. However, the drafting doesn't have as much to do with it as I would like. It is a drafting mechanic where you have your options, you take some and pass, but generally that's not a large focus of what you're doing. Your reasoning between which tiles to take and which to pass is not quite as powerful as I would like it to be. You tend to get a fairly random assortment of tiles. You pick the best of those, but it doesn't really make sense to restrict the other player's options or read the table very much. In that way, I did not think it was a super strong drafting game. However, as a set collection game, I actually think this is really intriguing. If you're looking for Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig as a drafting game, I don't think it's really going to satisfy that itch. While it is a drafting game, it does not really amplify some of the mechanic's stronger points. Now, where do I place the Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig in my collection? I place it on the shelf with my gateway games. It's a great one to introduce to people who are a little bit less familiar with games and maybe aren't super confident with some of the decisions that are made in that process. If you're playing with some hardcore gamers, I don't think Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig is really going to scratch the itch for a really great, dense game. If you're looking for a great game to introduce non-gamers to, this one is extremely approachable. Part of the reason of that is you can just openly talk about strategies with both sides, and there's no malintent. There's nothing that is keeping you from sharing openly and honestly expressing your opinions about what should be done on either side. So if you have a mixed group of gamers and non-gamers alike, I definitely think it's a great game for you. One other phenomenal piece about this game is it plays up to 7 players. Now, that may not seem like a huge deal, but we have a hard time once we get up into like the 6-7 range. It's hard to find a game that really has substance and that meets everybody's needs. We oftentimes will fall into like the party category. That is my least favorite type of game. So one really nice thing about Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig is that we can play with a larger group that doesn't need to be super experienced. It breaches a little bit of that party game space, and it does not feel at all like a party game. You actually still get to make some pretty snappy decisions and get to feel like you're really sinking your teeth into something logical and strategic without all of the baggage that comes with it, the super competitive edge or something like that. I think I'm going to keep it around because it fills a unique notch in my library that I don't think many games do. The decisions that you make and the drafting mechanic don't feel super in-depth and interesting to me, however, they are fun. I want to keep it around for the times when I want to introduce people to new games and when we have a larger group. It's going to be perfect for that. And as my kids get older, it's a really nice way to play a game that's not super aggressive and confrontational, but you are still competing with each other. So while I'm going to keep Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig around, I don't expect it to see quite as much playtime as a lot of my other games, just because I personally prefer a few more of the crunchy decisions, where this moves a little bit away from in-depth strategy and moves a little bit closer to a party game. Again, not a bad thing necessarily. It's just going to sit in my library as a game that's probably not my first choice to play in most instances.